theories that go together because each one has an influence over how the news is perceived and together determine how the message is presented to the audience. Sometimes framing is compared to that of agenda setting, but the two are not similar because agenda setting is how influential a story is on the audience, whereas framing is the viewpoint that an audience forms on a story.
Framing and gatekeeping were not originally applied to concepts in mass media. Framing began as a psychological term and gatekeeping began in sociology. Gregory Bateson was the first person to introduce the term frame, and Dietrich Schuffel applied it to mass media effects. The term gatekeeping was first used by Kurt Lewin. He used it to refer to housewives who control what their families eat by deciding what to buy and what not to buy at the grocery store. David Manning White applied the gatekeeping concept to media effects. He asked an editor who he happened to be friends with to keep track of his decision-making process for a week as he decided what news should and should not be released to the public.
The core assumptions of framing and gatekeeping is that the media draws public attention on certain topics and then decides where people think about it. Journalists select the topics people think about, while the frame in which the news is presented is also made by the journalists. A frame is how the media gatekeepers present events and issues and how audiences interpret what they are presented. Frame is the quality of communication that leads others to accept one meaning over another. Gatekeepers decide what information will be presented and what will not. They decide what information may enter the social system, and gatekeepers can be seen as controlling access to positions and regulate the flow of media influence. This show's decision-making is based on principles of news, values, and vital to communication planning.
In almost all news stories in the media today, framing and gatekeeping are used to make the audience believe in a certain viewpoint on the news story. A famous application of these theories includes the attacks on September 11th. After the attacks occurred, the media used the framing and gatekeeping theory to persuade the audience to believe that all Muslim people are terrorists. Some other examples of framing include the Cold War and the war on drugs. These phrases all elicit widely shared images and meanings which exemplify the framing and gatekeeping theory.
Framing is composed of language, thought, and forethought. Language focuses on the situation and determines how a situation will be understood through word choice. Thought and forethought are important for planning out how a news issue will be approached. Gatekeeping has positive and negative sides because it is beneficial for deciding what an audience will know, but it can be dangerous because the power can become abused in choosing information by the editor.
Framing and gatekeeping has always been decided by the mass medium. For example, an editor decides what stories should be published in the newspaper and what stories we are going to read. As the audience, we rely on these mass mediums for our information. We depend on newspapers, news stories, publicists, and policy advisors to inform us on our newsworthy stories. But we are starting to see a shift from this general acceptance. Due to technological advancements, user-generated content such as blogs and podcasts have begun to reverse their roles. Instead of the audience relying on the media for information, the media is relying on us for information. The content is now being controlled by the audience, and the growing number of media outlets allow for more opinions to be heard. While before, citizens have had a more passive role in media, we are starting to see a shift in first-hand reporting known as citizen journalism. Framers and gatekeepers will be threatened not only by new technology and competitors, but also by the audience it serves.
Now for our feature presentation on Framing